Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Yes, our faithful watchers, thank you for joining us and for being so faithful.
Yes, you've stuck with us for a long time. We appreciate it.
Yes, yes, we do. Now, we're on session 67. And let's see, we covered last time the letter that KH had been promising Sinnett for quite a while about his business proposition. As we found out, Sinnett had been relieved of duty as editor of the Pioneer, but on good terms because he was given a very generous severance package and was given 1 year to continue working there if he chose to. So it was up to him, apparently, as to whether he worked out the full year or whether he left early and collected all of his money. But in any case, he had an idea and wrote a letter to KH expressing his idea, which was to start a new newspaper, which would be called the Phoenix. And instead of being representative of all the British activities and policies in India, it would primarily be focused on the interests of the Indian people, and especially in favor of independence, which had been a topic for a long time, but obviously, as long as the British were still extracting lots and lots of money from the country, they weren't very much in favor of it. But also the wealthy people in India who were kind of in cahoots with the English and beholden to them, they often worked on their side. So as we learned in KH's response, it was no guarantee that these wealthy people, the Maharajas in India, would be anxious to open up their coffers and donate money because they were doing quite well under the British regime. So there were a number of things to consider. And there was no guarantee as to what would happen. We'll find out what does happen. KH was quite positive at this time about it. He thought that he had several people lined up that were going to be willing to donate money to benefit the average Indian people. So we'll find out the continuation of the saga as we go along. But right now, Sinnett is seriously considering going back to London for a while, since he can do that, and take care of some business there for the Theosophical Society, and also kind of smooth the way for his new proposition for a new paper. So he's playing ambassador, or planning to. So that's where we're at now. Sinnett was planning to kind of play ambassador, and KH is giving him suggestions, but he's got a project in mind for him because remember quite a few sessions back, they were beginning to get some enemies, as they called them, in London. Mostly British people, but also the Swami who had gone there and his right-hand man. They had several enemies that had developed. Dr. Billing, for one, and the Swami Dayananda and his right-hand man. And they were both working on C.C. Massey to try to sway him because he was the one major proponent of the TS. And so they knew that if they could sway him, that would be in their favor and they could do a lot of damage to Theosophy. So that was their proposition. And KH is trying to prevent that from happening. Let's go ahead then with letter number 101. This was written on December 31st. We only know that because KH refers to that date in the letter, but it was received by Sinnett on January 6th at Allahabad. In the cold season, he is back at his hometown, Allahabad.
Written December 31st, 1882. My dear friend, I approach a subject which I have purposely avoided for several months while gathering proofs that would be convincing even for you. As you know, we don't always think the same way, nor does that which is a fact in our minds carry any weight in your opinion unless it violates in no way the Western judgments on it. But the time has come for us to try to have you, at least, understand us better than we have been previously, even by some of the best and most earnest among Western theosophists, such as C.C. Massey. I would feel truly sorry if you were ever to regard me as a moral paradox. That's funny. Viewing me as guilty of pretending to have powers I never had, or of misusing them for unworthy purposes, and thus see me as an unworthy person.
Yeah, he's trying to at least save his reputation with Sinnett. Remember, Sinnett is devout English. Devout in that he is extremely conservative. He believes in the aristocracy of England and their superiority. But on the other hand, he has this relationship with KH that is completely different and in many ways at odds with who he is as an Englishman. So KH has been working really hard to sway him and bring him over to the side of the Mahatmas, and he's having mixed results.
Mr. Massey's letter will explain what I mean. That which seems conclusive proof and unimpeachable evidence to him is neither for me, for I know the whole truth.
Yeah, KH sees everything that he wants to, so he listens in our conversations. He knows what people are doing. He knows what they are thinking. He knows what they are scheming and planning.
On this last day of your year, 1882, his name comes third on the list of failures. Oh gosh. Something that has nothing whatever to do with the present arrangement regarding the proposed new branch in London, but everything to do with his personal progress.
Third on the list of failures. You may remember that in the sequence a year previous to this, we mentioned that 4 English people had been put on probation. Only 2 of them, I think, knew of it. They all would have had to be hoping to be on probation, but the 4 were Hume, Sinnett, C.C. Massey, and Edmund Fern. We're going to hear just a brief mention of him again. The very young, brash, and apparently handsome young man who was very gregarious and very charming for many people.
Also talented psychically.
Yes, extremely. And they had great hopes for him, but we're going to find out more about his character today.
Do you think many people are still psychic these days, or are there fewer humans that have natural siddhis?
It's hard to say. There are people who are naturally psychic who don't necessarily reveal it to people. They don't normally practice it, let's put it that way. At this point, there were plenty of people, mediums and psychics, who were making a profession of it.
But was it more accepted back then? Or?
Oh, yes, absolutely. People today are far more skeptical than they were. And the truth is, there were probably more psychics at the time, and I'll tell you why. Because there were more people who believed in second sight, as it was called, especially in Ireland and Scotland, in the outer reaches of the UK. those people tended to believe in nature spirits, fairies, and elves, and in receiving information from other realms. So they did believe in that. And they probably were more in tune with nature spirits than people in general are today. We are far more cosmopolitan today than in those days. The vast majority of people lived in the country and only went to a large city if they had to purchase something or for business. But yeah, there probably were more people at that time that were psychic or had access to other realms of existence.
I deeply regret it, but have no right to bind myself so closely to anyone by ties of personal sympathy and esteem that my projects be crippled, and I be unable to lead the others to something grander and nobler than their present faith. Therefore, I choose to leave him in his present errors. In brief, the meaning of this is the following. Mr. Massey labors under the strangest misconceptions and literally dreams dreams, though he is not a medium like his friend Stainton Moses is. Nevertheless, he is the noblest, purest, and one of the best men I know, though occasionally too trusting in wrong directions. But he entirely lacks correct intuition. It'll come to him later when neither HPB nor Alcott will be there. Until then, remember this, and tell him so. We demand neither allegiance nor recognition, nor will we have anything to do with the British branch except through you.
Yes, we're going to find out that there has been a fairly major change in the attitude of the Mahatmas. They are no longer going to work with individual people and instead try to influence groups of people. They tried for 4 years, well, they've tried for 7 years, basically, to work with individual people. And so far, it hasn't worked out very well. So they're kind of changing tactics.
So is this now the first clue as to the results of the trial, since it ended, 1 month prior or
Right.
2 months prior?
It was...
the end of November.
November 17th. And the result, as we will find out, is basically that, for one thing, no more phenomena. That has not worked. And so they are not inclined to use phenomena in order to gain people's attention. That was tried, it failed. So that is off the plate.
Which makes it harder for them because now they have to prove in more subtle ways, or not prove, they don't have to do anything, but people will be required to use their own intuition to decide for themselves whether or not these dudes are for real. Instead of proving, hey, here's a magic saucer that I'm going to fabricate.
And basically, they are starting to winnow out people because trying to appeal to the masses is a lost cause. You have to bring everything down to such a low level, if that's what your goal is, that you've lost all of the good people. So now they're focusing on reaching a smaller number of people, but quality people.
I think it's important just to mention a little bit more about this because some people will not have watched or might not remember what the trial thing is we're talking about. This entire project, in air quotes, of the Theosophical Society and creating an organization was a trial on the part of the Mahatmas, and then by way of extension, the founders, HPB, Alcott. And there was a 7-year plan to see how it worked in the world, to see if the world would be receptive or if some people would be willing to join and help spread this beautiful knowledge. And now that the 7-year trial period is over, we're hearing some of the results. And I guess this is the first, just from the letters at face value, this is the first clue as to what their decision is. But there's other material that, of course, is available that we know about that is giving other evidence to this. But I guess this paragraph, this letter is the first one where we're hearing the new plan, basically. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
And when we talk about experiment or trial, what we mean is that the Mahatmas are always in the background, always. They are doing their work from behind the scenes. So the experiment was to come out on stage,
Yes.
and to reveal themselves, not physically to everyone, but to a few people, and to reveal many of their teachings and many of the ways that they operate. Make those better known in the outer world. And to see if the world was ready for something like that.
It was an experiment in exotericism of the information here. And as Terry said, not necessarily through their own voices and through their own appearance physically. It's through others, through helping. It's like delegation, basically. You can't do it all yourself, but it's a team.
Yes. So it was a recruitment effort. And we're still seeing the results of it.
4 Europeans were placed on probation 12 months ago. Of the 4, only you were found worthy of our trust. How about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're down to 1 out of 4.
This year, it'll be societies instead of individuals that will be tested. The result will depend on their collective work. And Mr. Massey errs when hoping that I am prepared to join the motley crowd of Mrs. Kingsford's inspirers.
Mrs. Kingsford, we've heard of her before. Anna Bonus Kingsford. She was a character. She was a few years younger than Sinnett, I think about 4 years younger. We'll learn more about her as we go along, but she was a fireball. She was fairly attractive, young, and liked to dress very nicely and attract male attention, apparently. But she also attracted the attention of the Mahatmas and even the Mahachohan, because, for one thing, they referred to her as a 5th rounder. And I've tried to figure out, because she has some serious defects. So I'm trying to figure out how she is a 5th rounder. And the only thing I can imagine is that her higher self in a previous scheme had already completed basically the human part of it, and would have been ready to start working on becoming a Mahatma. So she apparently was ahead of everyone else. That's just a theory, though. But we'll keep that in mind as we go.
Let them remain under their masks of St. John the Baptist and other such biblical greats, provided they teach our doctrines, no matter how much it's mixed up with assorted foreign scraps, a great point will be gained. CCM wants light, and he is welcome to it through you. What does he mean by that?
He means that C.C. Massey does want to progress. He does want to increase his knowledge, but he also obviously failed as a potential chela. So they are now looking to Mrs. Kingsford for inspiration. So several members of the British TS have kind of been intrigued by her. The reason is she wrote a book called The Perfect Way, or The Finding of Christ. And it was published just around this time. It was based on a series of lectures that she gave in 1881. So a year previous to this. And it gained enough attention that she turned it into a book. So her main teaching was based on Hermeticism, and we've mentioned that before. It's based on the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, which is not an actual figure in history, but is more of a mythical character.
Hermes isn't an actual person.
Apparently not. We don't have anything that would indicate that he actually existed. And he's probably one of these characters that actually is a mashup of many different teachers.
Interesting.
So that was the basis of Hermeticism, but it incorporates a lot of the Greek mysteries and in the 1800s incorporated a lot of esoteric Christianity. Now, by esoteric Christianity, we mean that they don't believe in vicarious atonement, for one thing. They don't believe that your sins can just be wished away by believing something. They do believe in reincarnation. They do believe that there were other enlightened teachers. So it's a perfectly good doctrine as far as it goes. The problem is there is no really good, clear exposition of it. And in 1880, there wasn't a real good exposition of the Tibetan teachings either. It's only after The Secret Doctrine was written that we had something more concrete that we could go by.
The esoteric Christianity was a peasant, right? Or am I getting that wrong?
Yes, but that
was much later, I know, but do you recall about the date?
No.
Early 1900s. This might be a good time to address a question that one of our viewers, my mom, has asked a few times, and I've tried to answer it, but since we're discussing it, what are the similarities then between esoteric Christianity and more traditional sects of Christianity? What are the major similarities? So Jesus was a man who walked on earth. I'm not sure what the similarities are. I can imagine the differences. You just named a few.
Yes, and that is the basic difference. They, at the core, are very much the same. The only problem comes in with how well we understand those. The teachings of the Buddha are very well documented in comparison to the teachings of Jesus, for example.
Historically or?
Historically.
Secularly?
Yes.
Okay, so there's more historical documentation, accounting of the man, Siddhartha, than the man Jesus.
Right.
Of Bethlehem? Is that what he's referring to? Nazareth, Jesus of Nazareth.
Well, Galilee, okay. Nazareth, that area, northern Israel. So, yes, that is the main problem, is that we don't have great information on most of these until HPB came along with The Secret Doctrine. And even that, as we pointed out, is very difficult to understand. So that is the main concept, is that these religions in the beginning were almost exactly the same. They taught that we are all responsible for our own actions. No one can wipe away your sins. And there have been numerous attempts by enlightened individuals to teach those teachings to the outer world with very mixed results. As we've said before, when that individual is alive and teaching, everything is great. The moment they die, everything starts to devolve. Why? Because people rush in and say, oh, I can take advantage of this situation. Look at all of these followers that this person had. And then all of a sudden, everything starts morphing and changing and turning into, how can I make that work for my benefit? The priests come out of the woodwork. Oh, wow, look at this organization all set up just for me.
I have 2 points, and I know this is deviating just a little bit, but since we're talking about this, the first question is simple. When we are referring to the Christ, and this is for the benefit of our viewer who asked the question, are we, in this case, with this book and with Annie Besant's book, and when we talk about esoteric Christianity in general, is the Christ referring most usually to Jesus of Nazareth at that point in time?
Yes and no. When we talk about the Christ, we're talking about an office, and we're also talking about a state of accomplishment spiritually.
Like an initiation.
Yes, exactly. So you could say that the Buddha also was a Christ.
But the Buddha is a different office, though. The Christ is
Right.
one, the Buddha is one, different.
And the Christ is, you could say, the office of Bodhisattva, whereas the Buddha is the office of Buddha.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And they're not very different. They're
Mhm.
brothers, basically, just like Morya and KH are brothers. They are brothers too, with very little difference in their level of attainment.
Does general theosophy have a stance or a teaching on the man Jesus, though? Does theosophy acknowledge the man being holding that office, or is there not anything real concrete on that?
There isn't a lot during the time of HPB.
Mm-hmm.
Now, later, after she died, things changed drastically, and we'll talk
Okay.
about that later.
Okay.
But she did talk about some things about Jesus and absolutely acknowledged he was an enlightened teacher, and also sometimes mentions Christ, but not very often. And she was a devout Christian herself, as far as Eastern Orthodox. So she was loath to give that up completely and was glad to know that as she learned more about theosophy, that there was a legitimate basis for the origins of Christianity.
Yes. Thank you for that. Thank you for that slight deviation, everyone. Appreciate the digression there. Let's get back to the letter. We're talking about CC. If CCM wants light, he's welcome to it. But through you, this is more evidence how the masters are going to be stepping back a little bit.
Now, he's going to point out even more precisely, as we learned in our last session, that if he ever did deign to give any information to any of these psychics or mediums, that there were 3 words that they would have to use. And otherwise, basically, they were imagining things.
A secret password of entry, an entry keyword,
Yes.
something like that. Yeah. Last session. But let me give you a warning. An affair now so trivial as to seem only the innocent expression of feminine vanity may, unless corrected at once, produce very evil consequences.
So he's going to tell us a little bit about Mrs. Kingsford.
In a letter from Mrs. Kingsford to Mr. Massey, conditionally accepting the presidentship of the British TS, she expresses her belief, or rather, points it out as an undeniable fact, that before the appearance of the perfect way, no one knew what the Oriental school really taught about reincarnation, and adds that, seeing how much has been told in her book, the adepts are hastening to unlock their own treasures, so grudgingly doled out, hitherto, as HX puts it.
HX, of course, was Hume when he wrote that diatribe against HPB and against the Mahatmas several months earlier.
Mr. Massey, in reply, gives complete support for this theory and blossoms into a masterful compliment to the lady that would not discredit an ambassador.
So he's quite enamored with her.
Probably, says he, it is felt by the brothers that a community among whom such a work as The Perfect Way can be produced and find acceptance is ready for the light. If this idea gains ground, it will tend to convert the school of the highly respected authoress into a sect, who, although a fifth rounder, is not exempt from a considerable dose of vanity and despotism, hence bigotry. Elevate the misconception to an undeserved importance, and you will thus impair her own spiritual condition by feeding the latent sense of messiahship, and will have obstructed the cause of free and general independent inquiry, which her initiators, as well as we, would wish promoted. He's speaking in a very different way now. This is biblical sounding almost, or
Probably because he's been reading her book. Yes. So she had talents. She was a fifth rounder. And yet she had an enormous, gigantic ego. And as we have learned in the past, that's pretty much a deal killer. when it comes to becoming a chela, an accepted chela of the Mahatmas. So they are wanting to promote her to some extent because she does have some validity. And she is psychic. She received a lot of this information from guides on the inner planes. And apparently, she sometimes pretends that she receives information from the Mahatmas. And that's probably why he warned him previously about the 3 passwords. But if the people in the British TS become too enamored with her, she's going to become this messiah in their eyes. So it's, again, just like Hume, he wants everything to be about me. And she wants the same thing. So they're trying to tread very carefully with her.
Do we know who she's receiving inspiration from?
Not exactly, no. But she claims to receive inspiration from John the Baptist, other biblical characters, and most likely they are entities on the astral realm personifying, impersonating these people.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the book?
It's hard to read. It's basically a book called The Divine Pymander, which is what the original teachings of Hermes was based on. So it is an actual book in existence, but try to read it, it's very difficult. And a lot of this has to do with just the fact that these ancient writings, whether it's the Bible or the Divine Pymander or Poindris, as it's referred to, they are written at a time when even English was very difficult to understand. Try to read anything previous to the 1500s, and you find it extremely difficult to understand.
Right then, good friend, the truth to Mr. Massey. Tell him that you were in possession of the Eastern views of reincarnation several months before the work in question had appeared, since it is in July 1881, 18 months ago, that you began being taught the difference between reincarnation a la Allan Kardec, which was rebirth of the personality, and that of the spiritual monad, a difference first pointed out to you on July 5th at Bombay. And we've discussed that a lot, too, the differences.
We did, and we pointed out why they did not use the word reincarnation in Isis Unveiled, because
it was confusing.
The whole Western world believed that reincarnation was the same personality coming back again
and looking the same, and you look similar, and you're going to remember your past life and everything.
Well, you don't remember.
Oh, they didn't believe in that part. Okay.
Obviously, because people didn't remember their past lives. But they did believe that it was the same personality. Well, obviously, with the teachings of the Mahatmas, we learned that there's a lot more than just 3 parts to your being, and that the higher part of it is the part that reincarnates, not the lower part. Yes, it is based on what that lower part did in previous incarnations, but that isn't what reincarnates.
I wonder if they believe that the personality would have the same skin color and have the same features and look the same.
I'm not sure, because
it wouldn't make sense. Yeah.
I have never taken the time to try to delve into his teachings, Allan Kardec.
And to relieve another concern of hers, say that no allegiance by her to the brothers will be expected, nor even accepted if offered, since we have no intention presently of making any further experiments with Europeans, and will use no other channel than yourself to impart our Arhat philosophy. The intended experiment with Mr. Hume in 1882 failed dismally.
Yeah, so they're done with Europeans as far as individuals. Now they're only interested in working with groups.
This is kind of harsh. We can sense the shift, and we knew that Hume was being very bad, but we didn't hear anything of a decision until, I guess it makes sense. Now it's like, all right, here it is.
Yeah, and the information kind of came out gradually. It
Yeah.
wasn't just like a declaration.
I mean, now they're declaring it, or now he is declaring
Right,
it.
but only to him directly,
Okay.
and then expecting him to transfer the information to the people in England.
And now you will please follow me into still deeper waters. An unsteady, wavering, suspicious candidate on one side, an unprincipled, vindictive enemy on the other side, and you will agree that in London and Shimla, we aren't likely to appear in an attractive or remotely true light. Such a state of things isn't going to deprive us of sleep. Good.
No,
Yeah.
and this is important. No matter what happens in the outer world, they are never frustrated. Well, they do get flustered, but they don't lose any sleep over it. They say, crazy people, what can you do?
Maybe yes,
And
maybe no.
They are completely content in their own realm, but they recognize that we're going to muddle along at our own rate, and there's only so much they can do to help us along in our progress.
It's a clue for how we can act. When things either go our way or don't go our way, just say, is that so? And you don't lose sleep over it.
Yes, non-reaction. So they do practice non-reaction.
As regards the future progress of the British TS and a few theosophists, the current of antipathy traveling between the two places is sure to affect all those who find themselves in between, perhaps even you, in the long run. Who could disbelieve the explicit statements of two gentlemen, both noted for their intellectual eminence, and one of whom is as incapable of uttering an untruth as flying in the air? Is
All
that
right,
him?
so we're talking about two people. Let's see who they are.
Thus, the end of the cycle notwithstanding, there is a great personal danger for the British TS as well as for yourself. No harm can come now to the society, but much mischief is in store for its proposed branch and its supporters, unless you and Mr. Massey are furnished with some facts and a key to the true situation.
All right, this is the first time we hear about a branch. Previously, it's only been the British TS. So there are only three main groups. There's the New York TS, the American TS, and then when the founders traveled to India in 1878, they stayed in London for 2 weeks, and that's when the British TS was founded. C.C. Massey was the first president and was involved in founding that. Then when they got to India, they had, of course, the Bombay TS. Then they started creating a lot of branches there. But in England, there wasn't a branch to speak of, but now they're talking about forming a London Lodge, which would be a branch of the British TS.
Now, if, for certain very good reasons, I have to leave CCM to his delusions of guilt regarding HPB, the time is ripe to show Mr. Hume in his true light, thus revealing one false witness against us. While deeply regretting the fact that I am bound by the rules of our order and my own sense of honor, however little it may be worth in the eyes of a European, not to divulge at present certain facts that would show how deeply in error CCM is. Yeah, he's taking a very different stance. My gosh.
Yeah, let's see. So they tried really hard to save CCM, and they still haven't given up, although he is no longer a candidate for chelaship. Let's see what's going on.
I may not be telling you anything new if I say that it was Mr. Hume's attitude when the eclectic was formed that caused our chiefs to bring Mr. Fern and Mr. Hume together. Hume reproached us vehemently for refusing to accept as chelas himself and that sweet, handsome, spiritual, and truth-aspiring boy, Fern. We had laws dictated to us daily, and daily were taken to task for being unable to accomplish our own interests.
Yeah, Hume was dead set on taking over the Brotherhood. Incredible as it sounds, he was convinced that because of his position in society in British India and in the UK, he was vastly superior to them. Just turn everything over to me. I will get it going. It will be smooth sailing from here on. But you've got to teach me how to do the siddhis.
And it will be no news, though it may disgust and shock you, to learn that the two were brought into the closest relationship in order to bring out their mutual virtues and defects, each to shine in his own true light. Such are the laws of Eastern probation. Fern was a most remarkable natural psychic subject, very spiritually inclined, but corrupted by Jesuit masters, and with his sixth and seventh principles completely dormant and paralyzed within him, no idea of right and wrong whatsoever. Wow.
Yeah,
Jeez.
so Fern basically had divorced himself from his sixth and seventh principles, and it was mainly due to his Jesuitical training. They are the most devious individuals in the religious world.
Did we know that he was in cahoots with the Jesuits?
Well, he was raised by them. He was educated by them, apparently in India, because he was born in India.
And Jesuit is its own religion, or is a sect of, wasn't it? It's not Christianity.
No, it's an order in the Catholic Church, but it's an educational order. It's not about priestly duties. It's about teaching and manipulating people. At that time, I don't know much about what they do today, but at that time they were extremely manipulative, to the point that the end always justified the means. They were basically the Dugpas of the Catholic world.
When we talk about Fern being divorced from his sixth and seventh principles, does he really mean sixth and seventh? Because seventh is Atma.
Right. But he's saying that he was psychic, but he didn't have any moral compass to speak of.
Okay.
So, yes, the sixth and seventh were there, but he wasn't really in touch with them.
Wouldn't it stand to reason that his fifth wouldn't be fifth is basically your soul, which is our moral
part.
The higher part, right? Our causal body, which would be like a moral it would provide the moral direction. I wonder why he wouldn't say, because if you really are in touch with your soul, I don't think you could possibly be corrupted. Right?
Well, he obviously wasn't completely in touch with his soul.
Right,
It was like a partial connection.
Yeah. In short, he was irresponsible for anything but the direct and voluntary actions of the animal man. Well, that's just like most normal humans. Normal people, we are responsible. We do have right and wrong, but no soul contact for the most part.
That's right. That's absolutely right. We live almost entirely in the personality. The average person only very rarely gets a little glimpse of the true spiritual life that is our true life.
I would not have burdened myself with such a subject, knowing beforehand that he was for sure to fail. That's a funny thing to say.
They still have to give them a chance.
Yeah.
If someone says, man, I want to try this, even if they're 100% or 99.9% certain that they're going to fail, they still have to give them that chance.
Huh.
You never know. And we do learn that the Mahatmas cannot foretell the future completely. Higher members of the hierarchy apparently can, but the Mahatmas are in training too, remember. So they are, in a sense, muddling along just like we are, but at a much higher level.
And the ones who can actually see what future will happen are even more removed and have less actual contact. Well, they have influence, but because they're not supposed to meddle, we're supposed to be able to mess up. If they knew the future and they could stop bad things from happening, we wouldn't have free will anymore. Or else they would stop 9/11, they would stop the Holocaust, but then karma doesn't work at that point.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's why they don't. But as we see from watching them in their own actions, they are still learning.
Mm-hmm. The masters are...
They have to figure it out for themselves, but their chelas have to do the same thing. They have to make mistakes. They have to learn from those mistakes. The Mahatmas have to be allowed to make mistakes, and then they learn from those mistakes.
Mm-hmm. I used to actually think that the level of the masters, the Mahatmas, were the perfected humans where they choose to come back to Earth. They finish their school, their earthly life. But I think I was incorrect in that they're not a Nirmanikaya yet. They are not free to leave, basically.
That's right.
Right. But even though they're nearly perfected specimens of life, nearly
of
human life on this planet. Yes.
Right. So
yes.
The degree of perfection is relative.
Right. To us, they seem...
Plants are perfect plants,
right.
Almost all plants. Animals, some are the perfect representation of animals. Humans, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
We have lots and lots of imperfect examples and very, very few perfect human beings because we're only halfway through the cycle of our humanity. So we only have a few stellar examples of humanity among us today. As we progress higher and higher, that will change drastically, but we're still pretty close to the bottom of the cycle.
I would not have burdened myself with a subject knowing beforehand that he was sure to fail. Morya consented, for the chiefs wished it so, and he deemed it useful to show you the moral stamina and worth of him whom you regarded as a friend. Mr. Hume, you think, though lacking the finer, better feelings of a gentleman, is yet won by his instincts as well as by birth. I do not pretend to be thoroughly well acquainted with the code of honor of Western nations, but I doubt whether a man who, during the absence of the owner of certain private letters, avails himself of the key from the pocket of a vest carelessly left on the veranda during work, opens the drawer of a writing desk, reads the private letters of that person, takes notes from them, and then uses those contents as a weapon to satisfy his hatred and vindictiveness against their writer. I doubt, I say, even in the West, that such a man would be regarded as the ideal of even the average gentleman. This and much more was done by Mr. Hume.
So this man who considers himself the epitome of an English gentleman apparently saw a vest on the veranda, rifled through it and got a key out of it and said, I
wonder what this goes to.
He knew exactly what it went to. It goes to the desk, opens it up, reads and takes notes of certain letters that are inside, locks it up, and puts the key back in the vest. That's his idea of being a gentleman.
Had I told you of it last August, you would never have believed me, and now I am prepared to prove it over his own signature. Having twice been caught doing the same thing by Morya, my brother had Damodar write a letter to Fern, enclosing a copy of a letter of Mr. Hume's to me. The knowledge of their contents was to bring to light, when the time came, the true gentlemanly instincts and the honesty of him who sets himself so high above humanity. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
He is now caught in his own net, hatred and the irresistible desire to abuse and vilify in a letter to Alcott, one who is so immeasurably higher than all his detractors, have led Mr. Hume into an imprudent confession. When caught and cornered, he resorts to a downright barefaced lie.
Yes, and that's what these bullies do. They claim to be so pious and so superior to other people. And when you point out that they are not what they claim to be, they get angry.
Yeah. When you try to use logic and proof and you can't really deny it, they light a fire to it and try to change the narrative somehow by making you distracted, and they get mad at you or try to make you mad or do something else.
But anger is the main weapon they use to, you better back off or else you're going to get hurt.
It's like an animal. After this preliminary presentation of facts and explanation, I'm going to introduce certain extracts from private letters not intended for your eyes, but far from confidential, since in nearly every one of them, Mr. Hume begs the addressee to have them read by other theosophists. I hope this will not be construed as a mark of ungentlemanly conduct by you, since nowadays a man widely recognized as a gentleman is often a low wretch, and gentlemanlike manners often hide the soul of a villain. He is welcome to regard me in any light he pleases. These extracts I give you because it is necessary that you should be correctly informed of the true nature of him who now passes his time in writing letters to the London Theosophists and candidates for membership, with the determined object of setting every mystic in the West against a brotherhood of atheists, hypocrites, and sorcerers. So Hume is trying to tell people to not join, and
yes,
he's actively...
Absolutely. He is actively working against the brothers, against Theosophy, because his ego has been hurt, and he's going to make them pay for it.
Do you know at this point what Sinnett and Hume's relationship is these days?
We don't know a lot. They don't seem to be nearly as close as they were previously.
Wow, this is crazy. We knew that he was angry, and we were concerned that he was capable of starting rumors, but now we have proof that he's actively sending letters to would-be members.
Yeah.
That's silly. That's so
and
ridiculous.
at the same time, we're going to find out he's trying to convince the more influential people in India that he's not really disparaging the Mahatmas who they revere. So he's trying to play both. He's trying to convince the English people to stay away from Theosophy and not support it. And yet he's trying to convince the Indian people that he's on their side.
It will help to guide your actions in the event of possible mischief caused by your friend and our well-wisher, who, while denouncing my brother as a pilferer, coward, liar, and of baseness incarnate, insults me with words of pitying praise, for he thinks I am traitor enough to accept them and imbecile enough not to recognize their real value.
So he's trying to play Morya and KH against each other.
Such a friend is to be guarded against. His good actions are many, his vices far more numerous. The former have always been largely controlled and promoted by his inordinate self-love and combativeness, and if it is not yet determined which will control the impulses in the end, whose outcome will determine his next birth, we may prophesy with a degree of assurance that he will never become an adept, either in this or his future life.
So they gave him his chance. They were more than patient with him. But at the same time, remember, they were setting up things so that he would either go very clearly one way or the other. Well, he went the other.
When he says that he'll never become an adept, that's not true. I mean, everyone will at some point.
He thinks he's already almost an adept.
Hume does?
Hume does. So in this life and his next life, and maybe even the next life after that, he has no chance. He can still redeem himself, but he's digging a big hole for himself.
Right. His spiritual aspirations received a full chance to develop. He was tested, as all have to be, but the victor in the struggle for adeptship has always been self and self alone.
And meaning the higher self. That is who becomes an adept. The higher self, not the lower self.
His cerebral visions have already painted himself as a new regenerator of mankind in place of the brothers, whose ignorance and black magic dealings he has uncovered.
So now he's going to claim that they are sorcerers. We'll find out what he bases that on.
Kind of ridiculous. The new avatar does not live at Almora, but on Jacko Hill. And when he says avatar, that's like the incarnation of what, a planetary...
Of a divine being, exactly. He really thinks he's something.
That is crazy. And so, the demon, Vanity, which has already ruined Dayananda, is ruining our former friend and preparing him to make an assault on us and the TS far more savage than the Swamis. The future, however, may take care of itself. I shall only trouble you at this point with the facts indicated above. You will now realize, perhaps, why I was made to collect evidence of his untruthful, cunning nature in October last. Nothing, my friend, even though it may appear absurd and reprehensible, is done by us without a purpose in mind. That's good to know. On the 1st of December, Mr. Hume, writing to Colonel Olcott, said of us, "As for the brothers, I have a sincere affection for K.H. and always shall have. And as for the others, I have no doubt that they are very good men and acting according to their lights. But as to their system, I am, of course, entirely opposed. But that has nothing to do with the exoteric practical aims of the TS, in which and in their furtherance I can as cordially and cheerfully cooperate with your good brothers, etc., etc."
So he's still considering himself a member of the TS and promoting their cause. Doesn't sound like it to me. So, yeah, he's playing two sides here.
8 days earlier, the 22nd of November, he had written to Judge P. Srinivas Rao at Madras, "I find the Brotherhood a set of wicked, selfish men, caring as a body for nothing but their own spiritual development. I believe K.H. is an exception to this, but I believe he is the only one. And their system is one of deception and tainted largely with sorcery, in that they employ spooks, that is, elementals, to perform their phenomena."
Now, this is funny. There is no way to perform phenomena without elementals being involved, but he's bound and determined to make them horrible people. Now, mind you, he wants to learn how to do the same thing, but because they do it, they are sorcerers.
And because they wouldn't show him, he's denouncing...
Funny ideas that he has.
As to deception, once a man has become a chela and has bound himself by the vows they require, you cannot believe a word he says. What?
Well, this refers to the HX letter and the protest letter that was received immediately from 12 of the accepted chelas of Morya and KH, and even one, at least, of the Mahachohan. They wrote a very strong protest, and in it, they said, basically, we willingly pledge the oath to follow our teachers because we have complete faith in them. And so he took that to mean that whatever they are directed to do, they will do. And that is a complete lie, because as we have found, any of them are able to disregard anything that is suggested to them if they disagree with it. There might be consequences if they did something that was harmful, but on the other hand, they can always disregard what HPB would consider an order, because she and Damodar and certain others, if one of their Mahatmas, even not their own, but even one of the other Mahatmas suggested something, that to them was an order, and they did it.
Cannot believe a word he says. He will lie systematically. As for sorcery, the fact is that until the time of Tsongkhapa, they were a set of unmitigated, vile sorcerers.
We need to talk about that, because Tsongkhapa was the reformer of Buddhism, of Tibetan Buddhism. Prior to that time, there was a lot of sorcery. It was basically the Dugpas, or the Bon religion, that was completely in charge of Tibetan Buddhism. And it was very nefarious. It was basically black magic. So the reformer, Tsongkhapa, came along, cleaned it up, and formed what is called the Gelugpa sect of Tibetan Buddhism. The other major sect, which follows the old religion, is the Drugpa sect. So, two different sects, one is good, one is evil. Perfect combination. So, the Dalai Lama, the Teshu Lama, and the Mahatmas all belong to the Gelugpa sect. And Hume is claiming that they are still following the old religion. A complete lie. Just pulled out of his hat.
Every chela is a slave of the most abject description, a slave in thought as well as in word and deed. Our society is a noble edifice in outside show, but is built on the shifting sands of atheism, a whited sepulchre all bright outside, but inside full of deceit and the dead bones of a pernicious Jesuitical system.
And here he's referring to a quote in the Bible. Jesus was quite often talking about the motives of the scribes and Pharisees because they were pious on the outside, but they were actually conniving and cunning and extremely selfishly motivated. And he compared them to a sepulcher, meaning a burial place that is all white and beautiful on the outside, but on the inside is full of dead men's bones and evil.
This is so crazy that he's writing these things. You are at liberty to make what use you please of this letter inside the society.
So apparently this judge was a member of this society. And he is disparaging the masters, but I don't know what the response was from Judge Rao, but hopefully he didn't fall for it.
Yeah. On the 9th of the same month, he wrote to Mr. Alcott of the blatant selfishness of the Brotherhood, intent solely on their own spiritual development.
Remember, quite some time ago, K.H. said if he ever becomes a critic, an enemy of the society, he will write his ink dry denouncing us. That's exactly what he's doing. That was a prophecy.
Hume is spending so much of his time doing this. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, and he doesn't understand that. The amount of hatred and anger that he's expressing creates an enormous amount of karma. He had enough bad karma to start with, and now he's multiplying that several times. That's why it will take him a long, long time to dig himself out of the hole that he's making.
On the 8th of September, in a letter to 12 chelas,
the same ones that wrote the response to his letter in the Theosophist,
the very ones he was referring to in the letter to Judge Srinivas Rao of November 22nd, after having received an exasperatingly candid joint reply from them to the letter mentioned before, as liars and bound slaves, he said, as you know, that he, quote, should not have expected any European to read between the lines, end quote, of his plot in the HX letter in the Theosophist, but a set of Brahmins, not ordinary Brahmins, but men of the highest, noblest training, may rest assured that I shall never say or do anything that is not for the advantage of the brothers, the society, and all its objects.
And then K.H. adds a little note.
So I guess the charges of sorcery and dishonesty are to the advantage of Asiatic adepts.
Yeah, his reasoning is very flawed.
And there are holes in his stories, and if anyone understood the bigger picture, they would see right through him.
Yes, they would. Oh. And I'm assuming that some people at least did see through it.
I hope. But back then there was no internet, so it was harder to...
That's right. That is right.
It was hard, yeah. In this same letter, if you remember, he adds that it is the most efficient weapon ever forged for the conversion of the infidels at home. And he, of course, expected, by writing this letter in the Theosophist, to take our dear old lady in. I could not take her into the plot, etc., etc.
I'm not quite sure what he meant by that. He's not very eloquent in his writing and not very clear sometimes, but he's trying to make things appear other than what they actually are. We can see, as Paul said, right through his ploy. He's trying to smooth things over here. He's trying to attack over there. And it should be obvious, but in those days, as Paul mentioned, communications were very slow. It was very difficult to sort things out. Today, we can sort it out. If you have any discernment whatsoever, we can sort it out quite easily.
And many of us probably can relate to this kind of thing. How many times do you open up social media, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, anything, even YouTube videos, the comments? rants. We see rants. And then, of course, sometimes tens or hundreds of comments below the rant where it's just back and forth, instantaneous. So that kind of thing obviously can't happen back then. So you can't really use your discernment to see who's the one ranting and who's the one with the temper. And then you can also sometimes see on these comment threads what's been deleted because someone blew up and they realize, oh, I better delete that. I better not let that stay there. It's harder to do that. You have to use much more of your own discernment and patience and clarity to do it right, especially back in these days.
The people who have developed discernment are moving very rapidly today. The ones who don't have discernment are still muddling along because they can't see clearly.
With all his cunning and diplomacy, he really seems to suffer from a loss of memory. Oh, gosh. Not only had he taken the dear old lady into the plot in a long private letter written to her a few hours after the said efficient weapon had been sent for publication, a letter sent by her to you and which you lost in your packing up at Shimla to come down, but he had actually gone out of his way to put a few words of explanation on the back of the said letter. It is preserved, as is every other manuscript, by Damodar. Oh. And the note runs thus.
Now, this is a note from Hume. He sent the letter to HPB, and then he wrote this note to HPB.
Please print this carefully and without alteration. It answers admirably Davison's and other letters from home.
Yes, he claims that the only purpose for this was to convert the infidels at home, meaning in England. I have no idea how he thought that would work, but he's trying to justify something that he realizes now looks really bad. And he's coming up with all of these reasonings and excuses that are nothing but a flurry of word salad.
Word salad. Having thus himself forged this most efficient weapon for the conversion of the infidels at home, as to our actual existence and unable henceforth to deny it, what better antidote than to add to the hints contained in it well-defined charges of sorcery, etc.?
Most of the people who didn't care for theosophy or the idea of the Mahatmas said, well, obviously they are fake. HPB invented them. She wrote all of these letters, so throw it away, discard it, disregard it. But he can't do that because he's now admitted that they do exist. So what can he do? The only thing he can do is to push them down by throwing false charges at them.
Discredit them. Yeah. It's one of the tactics that you see it all the time.
Yes.
That people that are like this, they try to eliminate their opponents or discredit them.
And they fool lots of people, the ones who are not very discerning.
Right. Of course. And now comes the crowning touch. Writing on the 1st of December to Mr. Alcott, the first letter referred to above, he distinctly claims adept powers. Wow. Quote, I am very sorry I cannot join you in the body in Bombay, but if allowed, I may nevertheless perhaps assist you there, end quote.
This is funny because that was the date of the annual convention. And he said, I'm sorry I won't be able to join you physically, but I may, if it's permitted, join you, meaning astrally.
Wow.
He's pretending to have ability.
He's got some problems. My gosh. Yet in Fern's case, he says, it is a perfect chaos and no one can tell what is really owing and what is not. And several letters upon the same topic teem with acknowledgement that he had no power to see what was going on during the past 6 months.
Yeah, so he doesn't dare pretend that to the Mahatmas because they can see. This is how dumb he is. He really is dumb.
Quite the contrary, it would seem, since in a letter to me in this same period, he describes himself as not on a level spiritually with him, Fern, Sinnett, and others.
So, yeah, he claims he's not even spiritually as advanced as Fern or Sinnett or several other people. And yet, to other people, he pretends he's got powers.
He did not dare brag to me of his spiritual clairvoyance, but now having broken forever with the Tibetan sorcerers, his potential adept powers have suddenly developed tremendously. He informs Alcott in the same letter that a certain amount of pranayama for a few months, 6 weeks in all, was necessary to ensure concentration at first. I have passed that stage, and now I am a yogi.
Yeah, so he is now a yogi, endowed with powers because he practiced pranayama for a whole 6 weeks.
I wonder who's teaching him.
It was the Swami of Almora.
Oh, the guy that he was hooking up with before.
Yeah, so he apparently learned at least a pranayama exercise, and it was enough to give him a little bit of clairvoyance or something that makes him now a yogi.
But do you think he actually did gain anything at all?
He thinks he has.
He thinks he has.
He's convinced himself that he's now a yogi.
What he is now charged with is of so grave a character that I would never have asked you to believe it on my simple assertion. Hence this long letter and the following evidence. Please read it with the utmost care and draw your conclusions solely on that evidence.
He obviously sent some other letter with it. He quoted short segments from some, but he also sent additional material which we don't have.
In his July letter to me, he blames us for Fern's course of falsehood, his pretended visions and pretended inspirations from us, and in the letter to Mr. Alcott on December 1st, he accuses Morya, my beloved brother, with acting in a most dishonorable manner, adding that he has, quote, never since looked upon him as a gentleman for having caused Damodar to send Fern a transcript of my confidential report on him. This he regards as a dishonorable breach of confidence, so gross that Morya was afraid to even let K.H. know how he had stolen and made a bad use of my letter to him. K.H. is a gentleman, I believe, and would scorn so base an act. He is ridiculous for saying.
He's trying to play them against each other as if they don't know exactly what each one is doing.
How in the world could a person think that you can turn Morya and KH against each other?
This is how clueless he is. He really is. His anger has made him crazy. It really has. And there's a reason why the word mad can mean both angry and crazy, because it does drive people crazy.
Wow. No doubt I would have if it had been done without my knowledge and were it not absolutely necessary, in view of clearly foreseen events, to bring Mr. Hume to betray himself and thus counteract the influence and authority of his vindictive nature. The letter so transcribed was not marked confidential, and the words, I am ready to say so to Fern's face at any day, are there. However, the unmeasured abuse in his truly saintly and gentlemanly indignation at Morya's treachery are followed by these words of confession. Fern does not let me do him that justice. Know to this day that I knew of this, of the letter pilfered by Morya and sent to Fern through Damodar.
So, yeah, he's complaining that Fern never divulged this to him. Fern and he are two of a kind, and neither one of them have much ethics.
In short, Mr. Hume had means of reading the contents of a private registered letter addressed to Fern, sent to Mr. Hume's care, kept in a locked drawer of a table in the house. The proof is complete, since it is he himself who furnishes it. Wow. How? Of course, it would be either by reading its physical substance with his natural eyes, or its astral essence by supernatural power.
Which he had developed, apparently.
If so, by what fast-forcing system was this, quote, yogi, who last July was, quote, not on a level spiritually with yourself or even with Fern, by what system was he suddenly able to acquire it, since it takes even us, trained sorcerers, 10 or 15 years to acquire it?
Yeah.
That's a juicy little
10 or
nugget.
15 years to learn how to do that, but he did it in 6 weeks.
Wow. 10 or 15 years. And surely not in the first lifetime even trying it or even training in it.
Yeah. So when people claim that they develop these abilities in only a few weeks of pranayama, KH is disputing that. He said it takes us 10 or 15 years to acquire that kind of ability.
Besides, if this and other letters to Fern were presented to him in the astral light, as he maintains in his letter in reply to Colonel Alcott's query here and enclosed, how is it that the benevolent Almora Swami, he's being so sarcastic, isn't he, through whose help he suddenly acquired such tremendous powers, could cause him to take note of the contents, to read word for word, and to remember only such letters as were kept by Fern in his desk in Mr. Hume's house?
He had some extra help, I think.
Yeah.
A key.
I have done an unpleasant and distasteful task, but a great point will be achieved if it helps you to know us better and helps your European standards of right and wrong to tip the scales, in your opinion, either one way or the other. Maybe you will find yourself in CCM's position, deploring to find yourself obliged to either accept or reject forever such a distressing moral paradox as myself. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, apparently that's a phrase that CCM used. I don't know.
No one would regret it more deeply than I, but our rules have proved to be wise and beneficent to the world in the long run. And the world in general is so terribly wicked that one has to fight each one with his or her own weapons. As the situation stands at present, it does seem desirable that you should go home for a few months, perhaps till June. But unless you go to London and explain, with CCM's help, the true situation, Mr. Hume's letters will have done too much harm to undo the mischief. Thus, your temporary absence will have achieved a dual good purpose. 1, the foundation of a true theosophical occult society and the salvation of a few promising individuals for future careers now jeopardized. And 2, your absence from India will not be a bad thing, since the friends of this country will feel your loss and perhaps be all the more ready for your return, especially if the Pioneer changes its tone. Some of your holiday time might be spent in one form or another of theosophical writing. You now have a large store of materials, and if you would contrive to get copies of the related papers given to Mr. Hume, it would be a timely precaution. He is a prolific letter writer, and now that he has thrown off all restraints, he will bear close watching. Remember the Chauhan's prophecy. Yours ever sincerely, K.H.
And I tried to figure out what the Chauhan's prophecy was, but I couldn't find it. If I come across it, we'll mention it in a future episode. We will discuss this more in our next session, but I just want to point out that the reason some chelas on probation succeed and others do not is based on the amount of faith they have in these teachers. Either you believe that they are what they claim to be, or if, like Hume and some of the other people that they gave the opportunity to and who were very wishy-washy about their true motives, they don't succeed. The ones who succeed are the ones who recognize that they do have the powers that they say they do, and that there is a reason that they have those powers. It's because they work on behalf of nature and the Dian Chauhans. If you don't recognize that, then you have nothing on which to base a devotion to those teachings and those requests that they make. We don't get to dictate to them how they do things. This is the way it has been done for unknown billions of years in numerous different universes. It doesn't change. So if we have no faith in them, we can muddle along on our own, like Hume is going to do now.
He doesn't think he's alone, though. He has his Swami.
We're going to see what happens with that very soon. All right. That's enough for one session. And if you made it this far, thank you for following along. And we will see you in session number 68.
Thank you.
Thank you.